Daly, please.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle, and amusing and all, as Deputy Wallace's stories are. I actually find it a bit regrettable that we've had to spend time on dealing with what is a useless piece of what I call soundbite legislation, and I'm getting really sick of the amount of times we have to deal with this. I'm just really awaiting now a bill to bring apple pie or something that sounds, oh, how could you possibly object to it? But it's not going to deliver apple pie to anybody, is it? And this bill isn't going to deliver a regulation of ticket touting either. This is a bill which we're told will make it illegal to sell tickets for what is called major sporting, musical or theatrical events in venues of more than a 300-person capacity for more than face value. Now, we know the Minister has said that 300 is going to be raised to 1,000, just to make it really clear that nobody is really interested in what happens in the small-scale venues or the grassroots arts. It's all about the big-ticket events. Now, I'm not really sure why the arbitrary 300 limit was put in the first place. Is it the case that the promoters of the bill want to see tickets for small gigs sold at an exorbitant price, or what's the reasoning of that one? I mean, if we're going to ban above-cost ticket touting, I don't understand why we wouldn't ban that across the board. Why would we make a distinction? The arbitrary cut-off point really seems to only have the goal of telling small-time artists and their fans that they don't really matter. And to me, it's a bit of an unnecessary kick in the teeth for them. And I have to say, music is suffering as a result of this domination. It's all about the big event and the big media hype, so that as a result, bands no longer travel or tour in the way in which they used to. They don't go around the country in a tour bus. They go to one large venue and that's it. And I do think the whole way the entertainment business is being organised, which doesn't harness creativity, it waters down really the experience of live music, and that's a debate actually that we could be having. But to get back to the random cut-off of 300, soon to be raised to 1,000, well, it does tell us something about where the bill is coming from, and it does spring straight out of the hullabaloo over tickets for big events, the likes of, say, U2 concerts in Croke Park or the All-Ireland finals selling for thousands and so on. And I have to say, it's very amusing to see a government that absolutely loves to put charges of populism on opposition TDs come in here with a piece of legislation like that. As Deputy Wallace says, we meet at a time when there are 4,000 children around the country who don't have a home. The number of homeless families has quadrupled in a decade. At a conservative estimate, 10,000 people in this country don't have a roof over their heads, and we're in here talking about this. Now, last night we heard the government and Fianna Fáil decry Sinn Féin for its stunt in bringing forward the motion on, of no confidence in Simon Harris. Well, I have to say, people in glasshouses really shouldn't throw stones. Now, last month, when the Dáil resumed after Christmas, we were told that the decks had to be cleared for Brexit. Only the most pressing legislation would make the cut this session. Everything else had to go into cold storage. And here we are, debating a bill on ticket touting. It really does give you some idea of what the government's priorities are when we have nearly 1 million people on the HSE waiting list. When we have the fact that in December of last year, the Court of Appeal ruled in an appeal brought by Graham Dwyer that our data retention law provides for a general and indiscriminate data retention regime. And there is a very real chance now that one of the most high-profile persons accused of murder in the history of this state will walk free. And he'll walk free because the government didn't take the advice of a Supreme Court judge that they appointed to look at our data retention laws in 2017, and who told us back then that our data protection laws radically needed to be changed. They weren't changed, and we're not changing them now. And I see no sign of the government even stirring itself to save ourselves from this now. I don't see in a bill amending our data retention laws on the priority list this session, and we're not here today debating it either. Instead, what we're here doing is dealing with somebody wanting to buy tickets to a concert or something. I mean, seriously, at second stage, the Minister signalled that she'd bring in a range of amendments forward to this bill when it goes to committee. Now, I have to say, I know from trying to marshal and push the coroner's bill through these houses, not just in the lifetime of this government, but in the lifetime of the previous one, how absolutely incredibly slow and difficult it can be in getting amendments drafted by the OPC. It's very, very slow and difficult process. And I'd like an assurance from the Minister that the amendments to this bill aren't going to be given precedence over the report stage amendments to the coroner's bill, which the same OPC people are supposed to be helping drafting, because we're 3 years waiting for mandatory inquests into maternal deaths. 3 years for something that everybody in this House agrees is a priority. And yet the drafters and the amendment merchants are still plugging away at that. Well, it better happen soon, and this piece of legislation, with all the amendments that the Minister has flagged, better not be putting that down the pecking order. But the point is that it's a torturous process. Countless PMBs have gone through second stage. There are 69 private members' bills before various committees at the moment, most of which need a money message from the government, obviously something ye can only do, but of course they won't get it. Not because they're bad pieces of legislation, most of them are a hell of a lot better than this one, but the government believes that it can marshal and bully its way through. You talk about democracy in other countries, and this stifling goes on here. Very few PMBs do get through all stages, and it's a pretty regular now that the only ones that are getting through are the ones from the government benches, like the Criminal Law Sexual Offences Bill, which Deputy Wallace referred to, an absolute nonsense bill which will achieve absolutely nothing. And that's not the way in which things should be done. The very fact that Sinn Féin had a ticket down bill that she wouldn't give a message to, and now we're here discussing this nonsense, new politics, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael's priority, the first joint motion in the history of the state of the government and the opposition, or the confidence of supply or whatever, and it's on ticket touting. You should be absolutely ashamed of yourselves. But just in terms of the bill itself, I find it grimly amusing that the arch free marketeers of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are full square behind a bill that puts a price cap on a commodity. Well, again, it tells you something about priorities, because you'd sooner die rather than put a price cap on a good like housing or the price of a child going to primary school, but you're very happy to intervene and do it for rugby tickets to keep the cost of prices down. When it comes to housing, your attitude is, sorry about that now, supply and demand, the state can't be interfering with the market. You know, really, if you didn't laugh, you'd have to cry over this. You flat out refuse to introduce rent caps, but now you're falling over yourselves to put a cap on the resale of football tickets. Are you actually serious with this? I mean, refusing to introduce rent caps has pushed countless people into homelessness. You know, refusing to put a cap on concert tickets isn't going to put anybody into homelessness because they can't cobble together a few bob for a ticket, a resale ticket to U2. I mean, I think what's more ironic is that in actual fact, the bill is going to do nothing to address the fact, and it is a fact, that Irish people are charged exorbitant prices for tickets in the first place. So if that was your priority, dealing with ticket prices, well, you could start at that, because you might actually be able to do something about that. Fatboy Slim is playing in the Three Arena the week after next. Ticket prices run from €51.50 to €61. A few weeks later, he's playing in Utrecht in the Netherlands. There, the tickets are €28. Nearly half price for the exact same gig. This is his tour. Drake is playing in the Three Arena in April. The tickets for Drake start at €79 and they go up to €276. For the same gig in Belgium, you're going to pay €56. And for the very, very best of premium seats, you'll pay a maximum of €106. Now, you know, you really should be asking yourselves, are the touts the real rip-off merchants here? Should this not be the aspect that we're focusing on if you really want to bring down the cost of tickets? I'd have to say I'd make, a further point as well. I mean, from listening to the previous speakers on the bill, it does appear that much of the impetus behind this comes from what I suppose you'd call the industrialisation of ticket touting, or large-scale ticket touting. That's where it seems to be coming from. Now, this has actually happened thanks to advances in technology and the concurrent explosion of ticket resale sites. Now, and that's a fact. But the main problem with this bill is that it allegedly addresses, from what I understand, is that tickets go on sale and then they appear minutes later on a resale site for a higher price. But this bill targets the people doing the selling and leaves the websites alone. Does that make any sense? Let's see. The people running these resale websites don't do it for the good of their healths. They charge a transaction fee for each ticket sold. In the case of Ticketmaster, they have 2 bites of the cherry until they were shuttered. Until they shuttered Seatwave, they got a transaction fee when they sold the original ticket, and then they got another transaction fee when that ticket was sold on. No doubt, when they set up their fan-to-fan ticket exchange, they'll continue to charge transaction fees. Now, if Seatwave is anything to go by, those ticket transaction fees won't be cheap. In one case, I know of the transaction fee for an electric picnic ticket costing €285. The transaction fee was €52.99, and that's after Seatwave had already charged the seller a 10% success fee. The word racket obviously springs to mind here. But, you know, the sad thing is that this bill isn't going to stop any of that. If the bill's sponsors were actually serious about ending the industrialisation of touting, then they'd be banning resale websites from charging resale or transaction fees. But you're not doing that. There's absolutely nothing in this bill that will stop me setting up a resale website tomorrow, writing a computer script to snap up a few hundred tickets for whatever the next big gig is in Croke Park, and flogging them all at face value on my resale site, but with a 50% or a 500% transaction fee to go along with it. Now, I know that the Minister had said that she's going to bring forward amendments to prevent bots from being used to buy tickets in bulk. Is she really? Well, I think, given that there's no commonly agreed definition of bots and that the people who use them are smart enough to disguise their use, that's not going to get you very far at all. But even if by some miracle ye manage to do that, which no one else in the world can do but ye do it, it would actually take 2 minutes work for someone to pay a bunch of lads in Bangladesh, say twopence halfpenny, to go in and snap up the tickets manually. There's loads of other ways around this legislation, and I'm not going to repeat the points made by Deputy Wallace last week, but it is true. You get your ticket at face value and you pay €700 for the pen, or you add in a lunch and stick on a few hundred euros for that, and you can do it all legally. So let's be clear here. This bill isn't going to stop touting. It will change touting for a start. Of course it will, but it won't stop it. And there's no intent at all. This is just to get a cheap headline. That's all it is. And as I say, you're the people going on about populism, and we're wasting our time because it's not even going to work. I think particularly when there are some really serious matters that the state needs to get to grips with, this is highly regrettable. And the list is too long to deal with here. But I have to say, it breaks my heart that we're in here debating ticket touting on the same day that Philomena Canning felt that she'd no choice but to go public with the fact that she is dying of ovarian cancer, in the hope that she can persuade the HSE to settle her case so that she can afford to buy the cancer drug Pembro. It absolutely makes me angry beyond words that this brilliant, caring, powerful midwife is denied free access to this drug because she has the wrong type of cancer. If she'd cervical cancer, she'd be getting it, but she doesn't. And it's a thundering disgrace that the government has entirely and arbitrarily created a two-tier system of deserving and less deserving cancer patients, as it has, and that it has done so as a PR exercise. And because a woman like Philomena Canning has been left to suffer, and she may die, And we could be discussing something like that, a woman who's given her life in the service of other women. And we know that her livelihood was destroyed by the HSE when they suspended her with no notice in September 2014. The High Court upheld the suspension. But ahead of an appeal, both she and the HSE commissioned a number of expert reports into the cases at issue, and all of the reports stated that she had acted entirely professionally, and as a result, the HSE dropped their appeal 3 days before the scheduled hearing. Her indemnity insurance was restated, but the HSE went on to conduct a systems analysis into her practice and found that she'd made errors in her practice, administrative errors, not medical ones. Well, these are the issues, colleague. It's just a case that and I just literally in 1 second, because unlike the previous 4 medical reports, the experts into this report was carried out by administrators who don't have medical qualifications. And this woman, basically was deprived of her livelihood. There's huge questions around this case, and she's been dragged through a 4-year discovery process by the HSE, and now her time has run out. The woman is dying, unfortunately, of cancer. Now, we need to be ripping up the HSE policy of deny, defend and waste time that's devastated the lives of so many people. I honestly think if one good thing could come out of this afternoon, it would be if the Minister went and asked the Minister for Health to intervene on Philomena Canning's behalf with the HSE so she can get the settlement she deserves and rightly deserves before it's too late. But instead, we're in here talking about this. And it is an indictment, I think, of the so-called confidence and supply that we have this situation here, that's the best you could come up with. I'm actually genuinely embarrassed for you. I mean, Deputy Rock went out on the plinth with his sort of carbon cutout of what was supposed to be a ticket tout, but really looked like, a flasher or something in the raincoat and a hat. And Deputy Rock was kicking him. If any of us did that, we'd be condemned for sort of inciting violence by kicking another human being. But this pathetic stunt in order to get publicity for a bill that is not only a priority in the real lives of people, but doesn't even scratch the surface of the problems of ticket prices in this state. It's a sham bill. And it's a sham bill in the tradition of a number of sham bills that have come out of this government. It's getting to be a little bit scary, and it does show how much you've lost the plot. I mean, we've had to endure the criminal sexual offences bill put forward by Boxer Moran, which didn't have any impact because it sort of brought in a type of mandatory sentencing and then gave the judges the opt-out at the end of it. So you headlines saying we're going to deal with unfair sexual sentences in legislation. But the bill didn't do that. What the bill did was create the illusion that they were doing something about that. And this is in the same tradition, because this bill puts up a headline. Nobody wants to be ripped off for a concert ticket. Of course they don't. So this is, in a very populist way, putting it forward that this issue is getting rid of and dealing with overpriced tickets and excess fees. But it doesn't do that. There are absolutely loads of ways around this legislation, and I think it's really regrettable that this has been selected as something which has made the cut in what was supposed to be a clearing of the decks to deal with Brexit, and only the most important of the most important is going to make that cut. And I think the very fact that the Minister announced, without giving enough detail really, that there's going to be substantial amendments to this bill, by its very nature means you know that it's a faulty piece of legislation. You know it's going to have to be substantially redrafted. You know that redrafting takes a huge amount of time, and amendments and so on take forever. So this nonsense is not going to progress. It's only to get a cheap and populist headline. And when there are so many important issues to deal with, I think that's a bad indictment on this House, because we're often told about it sends a signal. Well, what signal does it send? It sends a signal that this is a really useless place that doesn't actually pay sufficient attention to the job that we were elected to do, which is to bring forward good legislation that stands up to scrutiny. Instead, we bring in poor legislation. I mentioned the Data Protection Bill and so on, which is going to leave this state liable to huge charges, could result in a convicted murderer being released, all because you didn't listen to the judges in the first place. And poor law doesn't serve any of us any well, and I think it's very regrettable that we're here debating this.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Breen. Are you responding?